This is Jim Townsend, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our webinar on Grants Manager Plus. InfoStrat is a Microsoft Gold partner for Dynamics. We've been working in grant management since the late 1990s, and we work with grantors that are federal agencies, state agencies, local agencies, and also some nonprofits. We developed a solution for Microsoft back in 2009 called Stimulus 360, which was used by about 20 governments and tracking several $1 billion worth of grants that came down under the ARA program. And that solution is what became Grants Manager Plus. So Microsoft hired us based on our previous grant management experience to build a solution that's based on Microsoft Dynamics 365. And Dynamics 365 is formerly known as Dynamics CRM. It's one of Microsoft's financial products. It does marketing automation, case management, customer service automation. It's a growing family of solutions under the Dynamics name. They also are integrated with Office 365 so that you can log in through your Office 365 authentication. So our goal in Grants Manager Plus was to really capture the full grant lifecycle. When we looked around at products, we saw many that were devoted only to one part of that grant lifecycle, such as publishing a notice of funding availability or review and approval of grant applications or post-award reporting. And we knew that our customers wanted to have a single solution that would encompass the entire grant lifecycle. So that was our goal, and also to create a common user experience and standardize things like a workflow engine for enforcing your business rules, security, the ability to audit the transactions and the history of all the changes that have been made to a grant, amendments. We wanted to provide reporting tools and analytic tools so that you can do your own analysis to better understand the impact of your grant programs. We also wanted it to not work alone in isolation, but to have an easy way for you to integrate with other products like your accounting system, or perhaps timesheets or document management. So that's what we did in Grants Manager Plus. The solution is available on the Microsoft Government Cloud for qualifying government agencies. That means that it has security accreditations like FedRAMP and FISMA, and it's run out of data centers that are in the United States and manned exclusively by US citizens. The two primary government data centers are in Iowa and in Virginia. The solution also includes a notification engine which can generate reminders to applicants and to grantees. Applicants, to let them know if they've neglected an application that they started to fill out but they didn't finish, kind of like you get a notification from an abandoned shopping cart, and then grantees for doing their post-award reports. We also created an interface for scoring and review panels where you can invite your reviewers to come in and look at the applications, assign scores, put comments in. We've created some integration points with accounting, especially around payment requests. What we've found is that the business rules around payment requests are some of the most complex parts of grant management. The solution may be customized without development using configuration, but it's because it's based on the Microsoft platform and development tools, it's familiar to many developers who might use Visual Studio, or if you've done anything with SharePoint, for instance, or Office, the user interface is quite familiar. I'm going to provide a few more links at the end for additional information. I do invite you to punch in some questions for me, or if there's some items you want me to be sure to discuss, feel free to put them in and I'll be taking a peek at that question screen from time to time. We just released a new version of Grants Manager Plus, and we've made it easier to map to 2 different types of grants. This logical flow shows on the right-hand side what I'm going to call the simplified track, and on the left-hand side, the full track block grants. And the difference is that in the simple track, we have the model of a grantor interacting directly with the grantee. And that grantee spends the money, reports on the money, receives payments. On the left-hand side, we have a tiered model where we receive funds, say from, let's say we're a state government, we may receive federal funding. We in turn hand that money to local government, and then that local government disperses the money to individual grantees. But in either case, we need to have the program capture all the metrics from top to bottom. So we've now baked in some additional screens and ways to make it simpler for you to configure the logical flow of your particular grant program. For instance, we're doing disaster recovery grants in 2 states now, and those come from HUD, CDBG disaster recovery, or from FEMA, and they go through the model that's on the left, the more complex flow of the money. When you establish a grant program, we have a place for you to establish all the action plans and goals, the metrics that you're using to measure the performance of the grantees, and of course set up the budgets. Then we move those metrics down to the grantees because of course they're signing up to hit certain milestones and metrics, and they have a schedule and they have a budget of their own at the individual grant level. And then finally, down at the bottom level, we can have sub-recipients or vendors, for instance, that receive funding that maps to project completion, that gets rolled up to a higher level so that you can do a top-down report. And that's what the right-hand side is showing, the ability to validate the budget from top to bottom, and then to roll up the granular information from the finances from the bottom back to the top. The way that we interact with the grantees is through a web portal. I'm going to demonstrate that to you first, and then we'll go look behind the scenes and see where that data is coming. We can use Azure, Microsoft's cloud, or SharePoint to store documents that are associated with the applications. But this is the way that you would want your grantees to interact with the system using this portal. Okay, so let me leave PowerPoint behind here. And let's start by looking at the grant portal. So the grant portal can be used to publish information for prospective grantees. which means you can have static information, such as knowledge-based articles or calendars or deadlines. You can even allow people to create cases to go to your customer service. So once you log into the system, then you can see all of your grant applications. This is a demo account that I'm using, so it does have kind of an excessive number of these applications that are visible, but you can see that I've got some that are in draft, I've got some that are submitted, and then here's one that's been awarded. So it means that my grantee doesn't have to email me to ask where their application is in the process. This data is not being replicated or duplicated. This data is coming right out of Grants Manager Plus. So as soon as we make a change, that will be reflected here on the web portal. The way that you would create an application, if I just click on create, then what I'll get is a form which lets me choose what program I'm applying to. I can go ahead and fill in the information for my application. I'm not going to go ahead and submit this because I've cluttered it with quite a few already. But the way that we've set it up is it automatically saves, and unless that grantee chooses to submit the application, it would remain in a draft status. So that means that they can come back and work on it until they're satisfied with the submission, and then they hit submit. Once they hit submit, then we generate a notification to the grant manager inside the grantor that the application's been submitted, the review process can start. Again, if you have any questions about the portal, go to the questions pane and type them in, and I will try to answer them. So this portal is not only the place where we start working with the grantee, but it's also the place where we have them submit performance reports and payment requests. Now, you know what? I forgot to mention that I was showing you a simple one, but these grant forms can be as many pages as you need. And when you add a new field to the grants manager side, if you designate it to be visible on the portal, it will automatically appear on that form. You can designate where you want it to appear on that form. And you can also make it so that it breaks it into multiple pages and the grantee can skip from one page to another. We recognize that many grant applications could be 10, 20 pages long, not including the attachments. It also, the portal is also a place where you can put your legal terms and conditions, such as your contractual provisions, so that they can agree to them. You can use a product like DocuSign if you want to capture electronic signatures or other e-signature products. So once they've applied and they've received that grant, we're going to hit them up again for performance reports. And the performance reports are going to be structured based on how we set up the program. So what I mean by that is when we set up a program, we designate when do we want the reports to come, what are we measuring, how do we characterize completion of the project. We can also break it down into activities within that project. And of course, this is where the grantee would submit a payment request. And just like the grant application, they can see the status of their payment requests. Some of our customers have us integrate this with their accounting system so that when the grantor agency approves the request, that transaction is shipped to the accounting system to be turned into an electronic payment. Okay, so this is a brief overview of the portal. Now, the portal works here on a browser. I'm running Chrome right now. It runs on all the popular browsers, but it's also going to scale. So if I shrink it, or let's say I go into a form editor, if I just make it smaller, you can see that if I make it small enough, it actually turns it into single column. And the reason I'm showing you that is that's how it would look on your phone if you used an iPhone or an Android to create a payment request. You could do that, and the form would automatically adapt to best utilize the space that's provided on that particular device. Okay, so now I'm going to skip over to the web user interface. This is what we're going to use inside our agency. And here in the web user interface, we've got dashboards, dashboards that can show some graphs. I think I've got another dashboard here that I just set up for this particular demo. And dashboards are showing a real-time view into data. If I had created a new application on the portal and hit submit, it would have popped up and appeared here, and it would have updated my pie chart. These graphs are all interactive. So if I click on this middle button, this is just showing me a pie chart of my grant applications. And you can see that they're broken down by what their status is, you know, where they're at in the process. So this red segment at the bottom is awarded. If I click on that, it applies a filter, and look, there they are. And from there, if I want to see this particular one, I can just click here, and it will take me right to that grant record. I do have a question. Thank you so much. I am excited to get questions. What is the size limit for file attachments with payment requests? And how many scan pages would this typically translate to? There is no size limit for the files that are attached. I would you can impose a size limit, but out of the box, there is no size limit at all. Between the choices for where to store the documents, if you anticipate extremely large documents like AutoCAD drawings or videos, I would consider using Azure Blob Storage to store them rather than storing them here in Dynamics and Grants Manager Plus. And the reason is this is a cloud solution, and Azure is the least expensive storage of all the Microsoft options for storing those files. So do please, thank you for that question. Keep them coming. So since I drilled into this grant record, let's take a peek at it, and I'll show you what some of the parts of the form are. So this is the full, rich user interface of Dynamics 365. We've got a menu up at the very top, which lets us navigate around the system to other areas. We've got some toolbars up here. And then we've got the section which Microsoft calls a business process flow. And what that does is it shows you where it's at in the business process. We've created some sample business processes for you, but we fully anticipate that most customers are going to want their own business process flow, or perhaps they're going to modify the stages that we've come up with. So we give you the option to extend those, to rename them, to delete any of these stages that you don't want to see. And we also have sections of the form. So you can see that I've got some general information. Who is the person requesting this grant? Who is the project manager? Some budget information, payment transactions that are associated with it. We've got a place for showing where it's at in the review process, amendments, subawards if those are applicable, and of course later performance reports. So this one, there is a quarterly report that was due on the 15th of January, but it has not been submitted. It's still in draft. And I'll show you something interesting. Here, back on our portal, now we can see when these applications all flowed through and the active grant applications. So you can drill into them from here as well. There's a concept in Grants Manager Plus of record ownership, and that means that you can divide up your grants based on the program or based on the type of recipient, and have a particular group of people or individuals that manage them. So if I'm dealing with housing grants, then maybe I don't need to see transportation grants, for instance. So this record ownership is a great way to segment the data. And of course, we can roll it back up for dashboards and for reports. Okay, so let me go back here. These grants are shown in something called views, and this one says my active grants and applications. That comes back to what I was saying about record ownership. So that means they've been assigned to me. So you can see I'm the program officer responsible for these particular grants. I can assign them to individuals or to something called a queue or a team, which is a group of people. You can also filter based on other views. So this one of all grants shows some additional ones that they do not belong to me. What's nice about this is you can create your own views. So down here at the bottom, my views, these are views that I decided were really nice. So this one called Quick Grant Application List, I thought that having these columns shown up would be really nice. And so I created it, I saved it. Now, if one of my colleagues sees this and says, Jim, that is an awesome view, I can also share that view with them, or I can ask the system administrator to make it be a system view. And if they do that, then it will appear on this top list of views. So what can you do from a view? Well, you can view charts that are associated with that view. You can also export data. So I can click records individually, or I could select them all. And then, once I've got these records that are selected, maybe what I want to do is export them, or I can email a link out to them, or I can run a report on those records, or even do a mail merge. So they're very handy, and these report formats, they include PowerPoint as well. So for instance, if I say, hey, you know what, it'd be really neat to export these records to Excel. So I just hit Export to Excel in the toolbar, and then sure enough, I've got an Excel file. So I could take that Excel file, I could save it out, attach it to an email. Maybe I need to send this out to HUD or FEMA or some federal grantor. And you can do this with any view in the entire system. So this one I did with a personal view, but I could do it with a shared view. And I know if I didn't have everyone muted, you'd be saying ooh and ah. There's also a report writer and the ability to generate charts from here, like those charts that we saw back on that dashboard. If you want to do your own reports, if I come up here to this funnel icon, that's called Advanced Find. And Advanced Find lets me go into something like grants and run a query. And I can modify that. I can add more criteria. I can also change what columns are being displayed. So if I want to add a new field, I can look down here and say, well, I want this one called total time card hours. And then by adding that to this query, now I should have over on the right, total time card hours showing up. So it's a super friendly tool, which also in turn can be exported to Excel or to other formats, or turned into a report, which I can run later on. So that is the advanced find. You can also use something called Power BI, and Power BI is Microsoft's business intelligence tool for doing sophisticated visualization. For instance, if you wanted to do a map and show all the locations of your projects based on their address, you can do it right there in Power BI. Okay, I'm just taking a breath here and seeing if I've got additional questions. I do welcome all your questions. Okay, I'll keep part of an eye out over there. So Dynamics 365 also has mobile clients. So if you go to the App Store for Apple or Android, you can download those mobile clients. So if you search for Dynamics 365 mobile, then you can find the documentation and you can see what it's going to look like on an iPhone or an iPad or your Android. Okay, I do have a question. Can we upload data from IDIS or DRGR into your system? Yes. So there are two approaches to doing integration. Right out of the box, we support importing from files like Excel and delimited files. You just need to map those data elements to your system. The other approach is there are third-party products like Scribe and Kingsway Soft, which we use for orchestrating imports. And that would be if I want to periodically automate these imports and put some better error checking in and that kind of thing. So yes, absolutely. You can import into the system from other systems. It is also based on something called web services. So it can consume web services and it can be consumed as a web service. Now, I have to admit, I don't know IDIS, but I am familiar with DRGR. Okay, I'm going to take you to some other aspects of the solution. So in terms of the reviewers, what we have is the ability to set up review groups, and we track these reviewers. We characterize them as internal or external, and we can also track their skills. So if you had a grant program that required very specific technical skills in order to review it, like an engineering degree, you can characterize that here. I've got another question. How about doing a data transmit to complete IDIS? I apologize, I don't know IDIS, so I can't answer that, but I will look into it. Can the system generate automatic emails to grantees? For instance, a payment request is approved and the grantor could hit a button and the system would send out an automatic email notifying the grantee that a payment is on the way. Yes, we have some notification workflows built into the system. Let me show you what those look like. I mentioned before that this system can be customized without a lot of programming. So I'm now going to take us into the section where we customize the system. And I'm going to show you some workflows that include an email generation. And what we've done with the solution is include some samples which match what many of our customers have been looking for. But of course, we recognize that you're going to want to change the language on that notification. You might even want to change when that notification is triggered. Now, the two major ways to notify people are through emails and also through text messages. You could, if you wanted to, use text messages to your stakeholders, grantees, as long as you have their cell phone numbers. So I'm now here in the configuration section. And what I'm going to look at here are the business processes. So as I said, we've got, well, here I've got about 322 of them. And here's one that's a grant deadline reminder. So I'm just going to pop that one open and see what happens. So this one runs in the background, and it's triggered by a date. So it's set to run 1 week before the due date. So this is one that's telling people to please come back and finish their application. And so I'm going to look at what the message itself would look like. Okay. And so this is what we set up. Those yellow highlighted items inside the curly brackets, they're data that comes from Grants Manager. So this really is very similar to a mail merge that you might be familiar with. So it's saying from the program officer, of course, that's the person responsible for that particular program, to the grantee primary contact. And we're CCing the person who would be owning this grant application. So it says, dear grantee person, please be advised your grant application is due, and go ahead and, it's due on this particular date. And then it's got a signature block, which is pulling the data from the system. So this is an example of one of the many notifications that we have in there. And this one is triggered by a timer. So based on your question, you could just have it happen immediately. You wouldn't have it, wait until 7 days before. You could have it based on the status changing of that particular field that's in your system. So I'll show you another one. This one is on awarded. So this one is saying if it's awarded, then generate an email. And this one actually is doing a little bit more, but it's notifying that applicant. And then this is what that notification would look like. And of course, you would want to make this more elaborate, and no doubt you'd want to spruce this up to be a very nice notification. One of the things that you can do if you happen to be a DocuSign customer is DocuSign has free integration here into Microsoft Dynamics. So you could supplement this with having DocuSign gather the signatures right here in the same solution. Now, since I'm over here showing you how to customize things, I'm going to show you one other thing. This lets us go in and customize our data. Now, we've added hundreds of fields that are typically used for grants, but it's possible that there may be a field that you'd like to add that is unique to your particular grant program. So it's very easy for you to go ahead and add a field. So I'll show you, there are a couple of ways to do it. So here in the grant, if I go to the grant form and open it up, this puts me in the form editor. And so this is what we were seeing just a few minutes ago when we were looking at that screen. This is where I could select these fields. I could drag them around. I can go to the list of fields on the left and I could move them. I could change the sections. These are the sections that I've got set up, but I can change those. I could also add a brand new field. So if I click Add New Field, then a dialog pops up where I specify the field name, the requiredness, the field type. I mentioned the way that you have views for showing records, and they show certain fields, and they can be sorted and ordered, and you can write queries. Well, this is also true in the forms. So what these forms allow you to do is have multiple versions. So when I pull down this drop-down triangle, these are all flavors of the form, and I can assign those to different people. So let me just say, if I had 4 different grant programs, and the data that I needed for each of those 4 is very different, very distinctive. Instead of trying to create one form to please everyone, I could create a form for VOCA. This is a public safety DOJ grant, but I could create a VOCA form, and I would only put these VOCA fields in the way that a VOCA person would want to look at them. But then maybe I would do a CDBG form that's arranged in a different way. So you're not really trapped into one size fits all. So this has been very well received by our customers. And that also, of course, applies to the portal. These forms, this form does not look the same as the form that we were just looking at internally. It's significantly stripped down because a lot of those fields don't get filled out until later in the grant process.